Okay, this week's parsha, or shall I say, not parsha. We're going to talk about Shavous. We have a few questions about Shavous. Number one, why do we say Zman Matan Torah Seinu? Why don't we say Zman Kabbalah's Torah Seinu? As we know, what are we doing? We're being with Kabbalah Torah, right? Question number two. Everybody knows the reason we have flowers that we bring in a tree into the thing is because into the house is because the flowers, there was flowers on the bottom of the mountain, so therefore as a remembrance we do the same thing. And number four, why do we call it Shavuos? Yeah, 7 weeks, but what's the real meaning? What's the real reason why we call it Shavuos? And then lastly, if we have time, we're going to talk about why we say L'hadik Ner Shel Yontif and not L'hadik Ner Yontif. First question is, why do we say Zman Matan Torah Seinu? Why is not Man Kabbalah's Torah Seinu? And it's intertwined with the flowers. What does one have to do with the other? I'll explain to you very simply. There is a thing in Klal Yisrael that we call that's a yichud. What is a yichud? A yichud is things come together. When things come together, they create a greater. Example, you put a seed in the ground, comes out a tree with a fruit. Example, you put together a Havaya, Shem Havaya, with the Shem Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud, and you line them up one letter after the other, first letter Yud, second letter Aleph, and so forth. We call it a Shilov because the letters are coming one after the other, and that's also called a Yichud. The most famous Yichud is Amen, because the gematria of Havaya and the gematria of Adnus is 91, which is the same as Amen. And there are many other Yichudim, as you know, and those who know, by the bracha, Hamavarach Esam Yisrael Vashalom, when you say the Shem, when you say Baruch Atah Hashem, you're supposed to be mechaven to what we call a complete yichud, and a complete yichud is you're supposed to be mechaven to three things that are intertwined. Three shemas. Shem number one would be Havaya and Eke go together, Havaya and Elikim go together, and Havaya and Adus go together. Three yichudim. Trying to bring out that in a yichud, there are different levels. And a physical life and you see in the Torah as well, there are yichudim called a nishuk, there are yichudim called a chibuk, there are yichudim called a betisha, and there are yichudim called a yichud itself. The shika, as we know, physically, is not the lowest one. The lowest one would be a hug, and you see it by sukkah, that the 2.5 walls of the sukkah is considered a chibuk, just like when one person hugs the next person, so he's put his arm around him. An arm has 2.5 parts to it. 2 full parts on one hand is 2.5. So too the walls of a sukkah are kosher with 2.5 parts. That's a marshal of the way Rebbeinu Shalom is hugging us on the Yontif of Sukkot. Then we have what's called an ashika, which you see in Chumash Bereshis very often, that the two people who kissed the neshika, and the shika is taich, that they're exchanging ruach beruach is what it's called. That's also considered a yichud. Of course, we're not talking anything chas v'shalom physical. We're only talking between us and Avinu Shabbat. A third yichud, is a betisha. A betisha is like a banging, like we bump shoulders. That's called a yichud on its own. And then the final one is a yichud, which we mentioned before, was with the shemus. What is the yichud that occurs that was supposed to happen for Shavuos? Now, as we know, in Torah there's a mitzvah of Kabbalah Satira, and there's also a mitzvah to be lilmaid or lalamed. You have to first, obviously, you have to learn, and then once you learn and you know something, so then you could go out and give a shir or whatever it is, maybe a YouTube shir or whatever it may be, to give out your Torah. That's called a lilmaid or lalamed, and that's the essence of the Torah. Because if all you do is learn a whole day and don't give out anything, it stays by you. And there's a tachlis in that, but that's not the ikar tachlis. The ikar tachlis that you should learn, we should of course be marba kavod shemayim, and then On top of that, we have to give over to others. Now, normally, in order for us to, so to speak, produce an offspring, produce something else, you need a full yichud. There is a bria in the universe that doesn't need another physical body to create that yichud. Normally, you need a zachar and a keva, and that creates a yichud, and the yichud creates, let's say, on a physical basis, creates a baby, which is the greatest bracha ever, right? What happens by a tzomeach in the so you have yichudim, what we spoke about just now, by a behema and an adam. But what about a tzomeach, a tree? A tree, there's no male female. So the answer is that in within that tree it has the zachar and the nekeva both included inside it. In other words, that you put the seed in the ground, yeah, the ground has an effect, but the ikka is the tree itself. It has the zachar and the nekeva, it has the pollen, it has the blossoms, grows the tree, and the fruits come up. So it's all included in one. It's a yichud of one. By Matan Torah, when we say Zman Matan Torah Seinu, it automatically, what's a Matan Torah Seinu? He gave us Torah. What are we going to do now? We're going to do the same thing, give out the Torah that we have. You cannot be a Matan if there was no Kabbalah. So the Matan Torah Seinu is automatically including the Kabbalah's Torah. Kadosh Baruch Hu gave us the Torah. What did he give us the Torah for? In order that we should give it over to someone else, right? So we are matanim. We are giving out. Wrong Hebrew word, but that's what we're doing. So you cannot be that without being a makabel the Torah. You could be a makabel without giving out, but you can't be a giving outer if you're not a makabel. Therefore, it had to say Zman Matan Torah Seinu, because one, you can't be a giver if you're not a makabel. And that's why it says Zman Matan Torah Seinu as opposed to Zman Kabbalah Torah Seinu, even though it is a Zman Kabbalah Torah. And so what does it have to do with flowers? Where do flowers fit into this equation? That just like a tree, a flower is the same characteristic. It has in it a giver, a receiver, and a giver. In other words, it's included in one thing. In the fruit tree is the zachar and the nekeva creating the fruit, just like you, chelik of Klal Yisrael by Matan Torah, are also now the receiver and the giver. And that's why dafka we take the trees that we're supposed to bring in the house or the flowers or whatever it is to represent the tzemeach, that we are not just, we can't be a giver without being a receiver. So in one person, in ourselves, we're a giver and a receiver. And that's why we wanted to emulate both, because it's always lilmoid, ulalamed. One doesn't go without the other. That's the pshat. And that's why, again, why it says Matan Torah Seinu is Zman Matan Torah Seinu. And that's also a pshat why we bring flowers to show that included in each of us is a receiver, Kabbalah Torah, and a Matan Torah Seinu. That's how we're emulating Kudsha Bricha. That's one mahalach. Now I said, why do we dafka have Shavous? So I'm going to go because it's really a long drasha why it's called Shavous. So the pashtus says because there are 7 weeks between Pesach and Shavous, so it's the culmination of 7 weeks, right? Ask Akasha, why is the word swear, Shavua, the same word? As you know, there is no such thing as a coincidence, right? So we say also that since we are mushba v'oimed and Har Sinai, we are sworn, so therefore it's called Shavuos also, as opposed to being called Neder or something else. Dafka Shavuos. Now, really, what's the shirish of all this Shavuos? As we all know, Rabbi Shalom created the world 7 days of the week. So then I ask you, why 7 days of the week? And that, of course, goes back to the spheres. As we know, we mentioned many times, there are 10 spheres. The Gimel Rishayim we don't discuss because they're above anything that we can understand. So we're left with the bottom 10, the bottom 7, excuse me. Bottom 7 is considered high alma, and our world works with 7. So you have the 6, which is the 6 days of the week, and you have number 7, which is the Malchus, which is Shabbos. And Shabbos is the culmination of everything. And so too, that's why you have Shiva Nikiyim, which Arizal brings down, that these 7 weeks of Sphira is Keneged the Shiva Nikiyim, and at the end of the Shiva Nikiyim, we're supposed to go to the mikveh, and of course, as those who know, that the most chashuv mikveh of the entire year is not necessarily Erev Kippur or Rosh Hashanah, but is that mikveh that you go to, Vashmeres Habayke, after you spent the night learning, so you're supposed to go to the mikveh, and then you go daven to be makabel the Torah. Ikka Kabbalah Torah is by Shachris and Musaf, by Shachris mostly. When that mikveh is the most chashuv mikveh, just like a isha after Shiva Nikiyim goes to mikveh, so we consider the isha because with the kala we're being makabel from the chassan. And so since everything is connected the Shiva Svirais, which is the 7 days of the week, which is the 7 Nikiyim, which is the 7 years of Shemitah, 7 times 7, which is the 7 years of the Shemitah. So whenever we reach that pinnacle of Malchus, Malchus is always considered the Nukva, the Nekeva, and it's always the Makabel. And just like the 6 days of the week are in order to be Makabel the Shabbos, so too the 6 weeks plus the 7th in this case. When we come to the end, to day 49, so then we become the Makabel like the Nukva, like because we're Makabel the Torah, we consider the Kala, as so to speak, the Rebbeinu Shalom, the Chassan, was giving us the Torah. And what present did he give us? Not going into detail, he gave us what's called Chof Dalet Kishute Kala, the 24 presents of the Kala, which is represented by the 24 Svarim of Tanakh. I want to say one other thing, which is a Said Gadol Ma'id, which I didn't realize till probably yesterday. There's a sefer that everybody heard of, Reb Shimshon Astropolia. He wrote a pirush on a sefer called Karnayim, and I asked around. He says there that there's a thing called 330 klippas, which are only in our world. New thing, never heard it before, is what it is. Don't understand it, but I do know that it's there. So he says that in Olam HaAsiyah, there is 330 klippas in this world. He says, Kenoida, and that's one of the secrets of this world. As you know, when Shabbos and Yontif come, so we're getting rid of all divrei chayil, all the bad things, and we're only going to focus on the good stuff. How do we do that? When we say the bracha, Sheikh Hashem says, Zvanu, let's say, Lahadik Ner Shal Shabbos or Lahadik Ner Shal Yontif, what is the shell telling us? The shell is 330. And by us lighting the neirais, we are getting rid of and building up a protection against those 330 klippas that Reb Shamshon Astropolia mentioned in his Sefer Dan Yodin, a Pirush on Sefer Karnayim. Now I want to emphasize that. Why dafka ananer? Let's say Hamaitzi Lachem Shel Haaretz. Why dafka Halik Ner Shel Shabbos? That because that's representing a soul. What's pshat? As you know, the Gemara says, what is a neshama inside a guf? Mashal is shalheves begacheles. There's a fire inside a burning coal. The other mashal is ner ba'avuka. If you have a ner, a little candle, and you see it's attached to the wick, so is the fire attached to the wick or is it not attached to the wick? So it depends how you look at it. If you take away the wick, fire dies. Take away the fire, you have a wick with nothing. So they need each other. So too, the neshama and the guf need each other. So since we're saying ner represents nefesh and ruach, which is the neshama and the guf. Therefore, we say lahadik ner shell, lahadik ner shell. In other words, this shell is going to take away the 330 klippas, and the ner will survive because it won't be attacked by the chitzayim. At Kan, have a good yontif and a good year.